Welcome to another episode of The Communicative Leader. I'm your host, Dr. Leah O. We've all heard the buzzwords: organizational culture, engagement, and alignment. But for many leaders, culture feels like something that lives on a poster or in a policy manual rather than in the daily reality of their teams. Emma Gibbens argues that the most workplace problems are actually communication problems in disguise. Culture fails not because of bad intentions, but because people lack the literacy to speak up, listen deeply, or talk across difference. If your organization's dialogue is stalled, you aren't just losing productivity, you're losing the human connection that drives innovation. Today's guest is a global strategist and author who has worked inside some of the highest stakes conversations on the planet, from presidential campaigns to global pandemic responses. Emma Gibbens is the author of Anatomy of Conversation and the co-founder of Acknowledge This. She helps leaders move past fluff to have the honest, raw discussions that actually shift culture. In today's episode, we're diving into conversations as cultural infrastructure, how to move from control to curiosity, and the 7 conversations every organization needs to have in order to rebuild trust. Let's dive in and have some fun. Hello, and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million-Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Oh, Emma, thank you so much for joining us on The Communicative Leader. You have such an interesting past and all these experiences and what you're doing now. And I cannot wait to learn from you and hear more. And so I know you've spent the last 15 years shaping cultures through conversations and across the globe. So from Outback town halls to Silicon Valley. In your work, you mentioned that culture lives in conversation, not in posters and not in policies, which I love. And so in your experience, why does a policy-first communication style, why does that fail to drive this real lasting change that people are looking for?
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge, it's sort of a trope now, it's particularly local government's always the example I think of, when you work on your 5 years to strategic plan and then it just goes and sits on a shelf and never gets dealt with. So the reason why, the way I like to think about it is that policy is like the blueprint. It's sort of what we want it to look like. But when it comes to building anything, oh goodness, we ran out of 2x4s, or the widgets are late getting here, or that room doesn't actually fit in the way we spec'd it out, and so how it's built and is actually how it becomes alive, how it becomes functional. And then once it's built, then how is it lived in? How is it maintained? And those aren't things that a policy document can accommodate for, really. And so making it, more embodied and sustainable, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that too, that idea of the poster, right? Because I think there's so many instances where people think, because I'm a communication scholar. So it's like, well, I've posted it or it's taped to the wall. So it's done. Like, wash my hands of it. Communication has occurred. We're good.
Yeah.
And you're like, no.
And there's a fallacy here. There's a couple of things from campaigning that have really been useful. When I was going through campaigning in 2008, the adage was that you need about 6 touches for the voter to finally hear your message. And almost like by the time you're sick of saying it, it's just getting penetration. Nowadays, it's almost doubled to 12 touches. And so, you need to repeat the message so much more.
Oh, good to know. And that brings us to my next question. So you started your career working to elect Barack Obama, and later you ran a major campaign for marriage equality in Australia. So I'm wondering, how can a leader bring that campaigners' urgency, and I think too, their communication focus, to their internal messaging without burning out the very humanity, right, that we need to make this movement successful?
Yeah. And I think I just want to name it. You said common movement and that common
Mhm.
purpose, those purpose
Mhm.
conversations in the paper that I sent you, and then referencing the 7
Yeah.
conversations that shape culture. The first one's
Mhm.
purpose. And in all my
Mhm.
conversations since then, purpose is the conversation that people both say is most important, but also the one that they
Mhm.
struggle with or aren't having. And
Yeah.
particularly the way that I describe in a campaign, it's that sense of alignment and how do we all get rallied around this common goal.
Mhm.
And it's not something that there's a real tone thing here. You can't really push people into it. You have to pull them
Yep.
into it. You have to
Mhm.
invite them in to be part of that
Yep.
common purpose. And it's super motivating when you have a common purpose.
Mhm.
And I would encourage you to think as a leader creatively about how that
Mhm.
gets enacted, not just like a big inspirational TED Talk speech. It's creating
Yep.
challenges and competition, maybe having a common enemy, even
Mhm.
if it's made up, like have to
Yeah.
be,
Yep.
you can make it arbitrary and it still rallies
Mhm.
people as those sort of systems within us.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It's like you said, I think the key word there is common. Like that common goal, the common purpose, the common enemy, right? This common sense of camaraderie over an office competition.
And I would add, especially now, particularly in the States, common ground.
Mhm.
So how do you
Yes.
bring
Yeah.
people
Well,
together
what's
into the
that, Emma?
same place to look forward together? I know it's one of the
Mhm.
pieces we're really missing in
Mhm.
dialogue in the
Uh-huh.
US. And it's
Yes.
funny because, like, yeah, anyway, I can go down that rant
Mhm.
later. That's really not here.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, so let's talk about your book, The Anatomy of Conversation. And I'm so excited I haven't had a chance, yes, to read it.
I'll
I
send you
cannot
a copy.
wait. Yeah, well, that'd be amazing.
Mm,
So I know we have a lot of executives, we have a lot of HR leaders who listen into our podcast. So I'm wondering from your expertise, Emma, how does dissecting the anatomy of an interaction help any organization move past those surface level that talk that we do
mm,
into meaningful dialogue instead?
mm. And there's so much fear around conversations, right? They're naturally emotive, but also they cannot be controlled. In my book, I use
Mhm,
a campfire is the metaphor
mhm,
for a conversation
mhm.
because it's an organic thing. It's
Mm,
going to You
yeah.
can prepare, you can have the pail of water nearby and get the
Yep.
logs set up, but ultimately it's going to go a certain
Mhm.
direction. And
Yep.
so understanding the structure helps you get a bit of a deeper
Yeah.
understanding of those moving pieces and what levers you can
Yep.
pull. It really helps those people with an analytical mind understand something that
Yep.
is chaos and
Yep.
unpredictable. And I
Mhm.
also find that by understanding you get a sense of how to prepare for the conversations
Mhm.
because again, I
Yep.
think a lot of people think that they'll just wing it or like, oh, we'll figure it out as we go. And actually
Yeah.
preparing a conversation with intention makes it go so much more successfully. And the other
Exactly.
distinction I want to pull out too is that there's the
Yeah.
structure and the what to do, but
Mhm.
then I personally think more importantly, there's the how to be. The
Mhm.
conduct
Yeah.
versus the
Okay.
content. Because you can say
Yeah.
the words.
Yep.
AI could say the words, right? AI
Mhm.
is really good at
Yep.
helping us just figure out the structure and what questions to
Yeah.
ask and how to frame it. But the
Yep.
how it's delivered, it's
Yep.
not a trope. Again, it's like, this is a safe space, is what people say,
Yeah.
rather than
Yep.
being a safe space. And it's that
Yep.
intangible aspect of a conversation that's even harder to teach. And the model I use, I'll just
Yeah.
briefly,
Mhm.
is to glow, to bring
Yeah.
generosity, love,
Okay.
openness, and wonder is how you
Oh,
facilitate
I love
that
that.
being.
Okay. Yep.
Mm,
Yeah, that's great because I think too that's one of the hardest aspects is you said you have the anatomy and I'm thinking about this fire and thinking about like the proper way that I would build it. But you're right that like how to be in those nonverbals and even those verbals, like what am I going to do to let people know it is safe, that I am listening, that I'm approaching this with curiosity rather than judgment. So
mm.
that's really I
And
love
it's
that acronym.
Thank you. And it's something too where it's just like listening, right? Where
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
go in with the intent of I'm going to be a good listener, and then you go, yep,
Yeah.
bobblehead, yep, verbal
Yeah.
confirmation every couple of seconds, yep, you aren't
Mhm.
actually listening. You're focusing on the activity of listening. So
Yeah.
similarly, like you can't go in with like, okay, I'm going to be a safe space. Yep, I'm going to create openness and
Yep.
vulnerability. Yep. No, you have to just. It's actually much more
Mhm.
of a settling into an energy, which again takes
Yep.
practice. But yeah,
Yep.
that's where I would
Exactly.
emphasize the effort.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I love that. I think about communication as a practice, right? Like anything we
Mm.
can strengthen it with time and intention.
Yeah, I call it a craft. So yeah, same, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, thinking more about curiosity. So, you help leaders step out of this into a mindset of curiosity, and that's over control, kind of trying to push that old mindset away. So, in this high pressure corporate environment, we know we're always looking at metrics. What is the specific language a leader can use to signal that they're curious about their team's perspective rather than just trying to force alignment?
Mm, mm. Again, this comes from campaigning experiences, particularly
Mhm.
persuasion conversations. But I would say the biggest tool you can do is bring them alongside to get on the same
Mhm.
side as them. So you're both looking at the
Mhm.
problem together rather than being in opposition. So
Mm,
you can
mhm.
either bring them to your side or go to their side. So that might be, hey, you know that we have as a team
Hmm.
larger Q4 targets for our sales.
Mhm.
We're currently behind. Do you have any ideas of what we could do
Yeah.
to meet those goals as a team? Or
Mhm.
is anyone having something that's working well?
Mhm.
Or you could go to their side and
Mhm.
say, hey, we've increased the sales targets for each of you. Like, how are you feeling
Mhm.
about that? Where do you feel the overwhelm? Is there any
Yep.
sticky points? You know, and so
Mhm.
becoming, when you go alongside someone, you're then
Mhm.
two people looking at the problem together, not that they are the problem or the
Yeah.
situation is the
Yep.
situation becomes the common enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's just a small tweak, but a really powerful one.
Mm, mm,
Excellent. Yeah. So let's think about friction. So I know that you specialize in kind of turning dialogue into real change, and especially across cultural divides. And that is no easy feat. And Emma, I'm wondering how a leader can help teams get honest and unstuck when they're facing raw discussions that honestly most organizations and most people, most families, most couples avoid, right? This isn't just an org problem, but it comes with us into our organizations.
yeah. We'll never be out of work with conversations. Hey.
Yeah,
um
exactly.
Yeah, I think the thing that gets overlooked is, again, there's a real intention in the Western world, in capitalism, if you want to go that far,
Mhm.
towards
Yep.
productivity and pushing and this, again, this
Mhm.
effort.
Yep.
And so when there's something that's a problem, we want to go and we want to fix it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And again, I would encourage you to pause. And the most foundational thing to do before you get into those deeper, more difficult topics
Mhm.
is to create connection, right? Because
Mhm.
connection builds trust. And with
Yep.
that trust, you feel safe to say things. You
Mhm.
feel like you can say something that might be
Mhm.
uncomfortable or that you'll be
Yep.
exposed. So you have to create that safety through trust and through
Yep.
connection. So even taking a couple of minutes at the beginning to have some
Mhm.
play, have an experience, a shared experience together,
Mhm.
asking questions or
Hmm.
standing up, moving around the room, something that
Mhm.
breaks the pattern of the normal
Yep.
dialogue and the normal routines, but also gets people to see each other as humans first.
Mhm. Yep. That's so helpful. And I'm wondering, when you're thinking about connection first, and I love that idea of integrating it before these meetings or discussions, what are some things that you've seen worked well in terms of play or of experiences to kind of kick this off?
Mm. I mean, I'm a conversations gal, so questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even ones like one of the most successful questions I run in my keynotes when I'm doing
Mhm.
large conversations in
Yeah.
conferences is share a scar story or a crazy
Mm.
injury story.
Yep.
Everyone's got one, and like I love it because the room erupts and
Yeah.
someone's like look at my toe, or
Look at
like
this.
pulling up their
Yeah.
shirt, like here's the shark bite. Like it
Yeah.
just it
Yeah.
ignites people,
Yeah.
and so there's this energy, and people are
Yep.
connecting around a common thing that's, yeah, sure, not work
Mhm.
related, but we're
Yep.
creating a bond. And
Yeah.
it works
Yeah,
across
and
generations and cultures too.
exactly.
That's why it's
Yep.
really important.
I love that because 'Cause you're right, that's something I would, I've never had the conversation at work or at a conference, but I can see how you can immediately connect with others, and the goal too is not to be just seeing someone in that title, in that role they fulfill, but to see them as a person.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's yeah.
how funny. It must be funny to be watching that part.
Oh, it's my favorite. And then you kinda get like,
Yeah.
okay, anyone have a ripper story in the room, and you get
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
crazy tales. So
Yep.
and again, if
Yep.
they don't have a good story, they know a good story on behalf of someone, so you're getting
Yes.
like the
Yeah.
secondhand best cream of the crop sort of tales. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So
Mm,
let's look at conversations as infrastructures. And I really
mm,
love that idea. And I think for a lot of folks, especially introverts or those who have lower power,
mm,
knowing that there's an infrastructure, is really gold in, helping them to feel empowered. But you suggest that organizations, they don't necessarily need another strategy. They just need a better cultural infrastructure. And so, Emma, I'm wondering in your work, what are the communication blocks that you've seen that signal a culture is only being stated rather than actually practiced?
Mm. And as you reflected, I'm having a moment of irony where I'm like, I'm a strategist. Like, strategy is my number
Mm-hmm.
two Clifton Strength Finder, right?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yep.
strategy is important. I'm not backing
Yeah.
strategy, but
Yeah.
strategy is again, the idea, the framework. It doesn't actually have the
Mm-hmm.
tools to sustain the intent of the strategy because
Yep.
naturally it will be challenged, it will be tested.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of the signals that I see when I'm diagnosing if a
Mm-hmm.
culture is
Yeah.
vibrant, if it is a good
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure. There's a couple one is like over politeness. Over politeness is
Mm-hmm.
kind of the difference between nice and kind. Over politeness is actually a shell and a surface level transactional way of engaging. It doesn't have any richness, openness,
Mm-hmm.
honesty to it. The other
Mm-hmm.
one is strategic fog. Like, so what is our priority right now? Oh, we have 10 priorities. Well,
Mm-hmm.
priority, the etymology of the
Yeah,
word is
exactly.
prior,
That always
meaning
makes
one
me
above
laugh.
all others. So
Yeah.
pick
Yep.
one above all others.
Yep.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
so this
Yep.
sort of strategic fog means that the culture doesn't have a common purpose or the purpose or priority isn't
Mm-hmm.
known. Another signal is silence, especially in a high control culture where it's just like command and
Yeah.
control. And certainly you need compliance in certain scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in the
Yep.
COVID communications team here in Western Australia. Like, I get it, you
Yep.
need compliance at
Yep.
times. But if there's an overly silent culture or one where, two people always talk in a meeting, that's
Mm-hmm.
another signal that it actually isn't psychologically safe or
Yep.
engaging for everyone in the room. And the
Mm-hmm.
other one that I added, like, is kind of like innovation
Mm-hmm.
theater. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, we have such a rich culture and we do so much brainstorming and like, here's a
Mm-hmm.
hackathon. But it's hollow because the input doesn't go anywhere. If there's no actual influence, it doesn't actually
Yeah.
matter. And again, if you're already feeling like you have low power and then you're devalued that your voice, time, and
Mm-hmm.
effort isn't taken on board, better to not do
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, exactly. That reminds me when I joined an organization, apparently there was always an annual retreat. And when I was new, I was like, this is great. We did great work. And a more senior colleague is like, oh, and we will never see this again. But we're going to do it again next year. And we're going to do it again the year after that. And I was like, oh, yeah. So it went from it could have been this really powerful thing that I was so excited about to then just like, oh, you've taken me away from my actual work. I've already had this brainstorm for the last 3 years. What are we doing
Yeah.
here? Yeah.
And think about all that
Mm-hmm.
energy. So, like, again, the process of consultation and engagement is really
Mm-hmm.
rewarding because you create such
Yep.
energy. But then if you don't use that energy, it not only does it fall, it almost implodes and makes it a caustic
Yeah.
effect or eroding.
Exactly. So, Emma, you have trained over 40,000 people on how to listen deeply and lead with authenticity. And also, thank you for that work. It changes workplaces. So, I'm wondering, in your experience, if we have a leader who is making this commitment to communicate this new culture strategy, how do they do so without making employees feel like it's just one more top down mandate?
Mm. I think one thing just leaders be aware of is like what's their true motivation or
Hmm.
intent. I think the most exaggerated
Hmm.
example is the leader who's going around being like, "Look, I did a thing and this is
Yep.
amazing. Applaud my
Yep.
ego." But
Yep.
from when it comes to bottom up change, there's sort of two principles I
Hmm.
keep in mind: make it fun and make it meaningful. Making it fun is about making
Yeah.
it like engaging so people want to be a
Hmm.
part of it. It's something
Hmm.
out of the norm, again breaking that pattern.
Yep.
And it's not having cupcakes. It's a
Yeah.
scavenger hunt or
Yep.
video submissions or a competition with
Hmm.
prizes, even if the prize is bragging rights. Like,
Yeah.
it's just keeping it
Exactly.
fun.
Yeah.
People love play. We are all just
Yep.
little kids
Hmm.
inside. And then
Yep.
making it meaningful. That's sort of, I think a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and,
Yeah.
we've kind of seen an
Hmm.
anti-wokeness wave, and I've
Yep.
worked in this space for a number of years. But one of my bugbears is that DEI
Hmm.
became a party planning committee. Oh, it's
Yep.
Idaho Day. It's Pride Month. It's Black History Month. Let's
Yeah.
throw a cupcake and get a speaker in. Like, it wasn't actually
Yep.
meaningful conversations about race, sex,
Mm-hmm.
gender, judgment, really. And so
Yeah.
how do you make it a meaningful conversation
Mm-hmm.
in order to bring people in and engage with it? In
Mm-hmm.
a meaningful way, to be redundant and use the same word.
Yeah. I know, and I think I love that in terms of it being fun and people wanting to be a part of it. And I like too that idea that we're showing them. We're not just telling them, right?
Mm,
Things are going to be different and they're going to get to experience that.
yeah. And also, I'd just suggest too, like, it doesn't always have to be the leader. Like, recruiting
Yep.
other messengers,
Mm-hmm.
having champions within the organization,
Mm-hmm.
even recording like different voices at different levels who are sharing their perspective
Yeah.
of how this
Yep.
impacts them or why they get around it. And I suppose at the
Yep.
most extreme example, like, if you and you'll have a total sense of ownership over it. You won't have to advocate or campaign for it. It will be
Yep.
the communities.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, what a beautiful thing, right?
The
So
dreamland. It's not all, it doesn't
exactly,
happen quite like that,
exactly.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
So, my last two questions, this is the way we end all episodes of The Communicative Leader. And these two questions kind of work hand in hand. And the first part is asking, what do you want to leave our titled leaders with, whether it's an advice, a challenge, or a tip? And then the second part of the question is, that advice, challenge, or tip that you want to leave for employees of all ranks and across all industries.
mm. Yeah, both have the same tidbit today, is ask
Yeah.
questions. And particularly for the
Mm-hmm.
leaders, again, asking questions opens up the
Yep.
conversation rather than closes it down. It moves you from that
Mm-hmm.
role of authority, and it's not undermining your decision-making power. It
Yep.
doesn't mean you have
Mm-hmm.
any less, but it does open up
Yeah.
the conversation and bring people in. One of my go-to
Yep.
phrases is "tell me more."
Mhm.
It buys you time to figure out what
Yep.
to ask next.
Yep.
And there's
Yep.
lots of other great questions you can use. And then from a employee perspective,
Mhm.
as you said, we're all lonely, we all are
Yep.
craving
Yep.
connection. So,
Exactly.
why don't you reach out next time you're in
Mhm.
the lunchroom waiting for your meal to
Mhm.
microwave, or you're walking to grab a
Mhm.
coffee, ask someone a connection question. And sure, it could be
Mhm.
what are you doing this weekend? Or what are you doing for fun?
Mhm.
Or it might be like, hey, do you have any crazy injury stories?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Just something fun to
Yeah.
meet someone new and build a
Exactly.
relationship across the organization.
Yeah. Yep. And you're right, because then we have trust, we have connection, and it's a lot easier to navigate difficult conversations, even positive conversations with people that you trust and have a connection with.
Mm. And I guess for both one last piece is that
Mhm.
we can't
Yeah.
fix what we can't talk about. So go forth
Yeah.
courageously.
Yep.
Courage is
Yep.
having fear and taking a step anyway. You're gonna feel the fear.
Yep.
It's a totally normal
Mhm.
feeling, but the longer you sit in it, the more it calcifies. So get
Yep.
into it and take that action, take that step, because it's like a muscle. The more reps you do, the easier it gets.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Emma, thank you for sharing your time with us, your stories, your experiences. I really appreciate the good work you're doing, and from a communicative perspective, thank you. That
Oh,
really makes a difference in people's lives, and they come home happier or less stressed. I mean, we really can see meaningful change when organizations are nicer places to work.
absolutely. Totally agree. The ripple effects go far beyond just performance
Yes.
outcomes.
All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.